your stuff. Jenna's going to record the meeting. And I'm going to do a little, oh, there's a bunch of Wisconsin people here today. Hey, Wisconsin peeps. Woo woo. I'm going to do a very brief introduction, and then I'm going to let Leora give you more detail. So I'm super excited. I've been hoping this would work out for our schedules to work out for my very good friend and colleague Leora to join us. Yeah, we've been doing this work together for many years, and I'm really excited about the role she has now in supporting school mental health. And I'll let her tell you more about where she does that from. All right, Leora, are you unmuted? There you go.
No, I'm into it. You said you were going to do a short intro, and that was with the quickness. All right, great. Thank you, Laura. Hi, everyone. I'm so incredibly excited to be here with you. I've been tracking this lunch Thursday, wherever this falls in your day, what Laura and ACES Connection has been providing the last couple months, and we're so grateful that this has been a platform to support us in this time. And want to do a really absolute, I don't know if anyone on video, if you can just join me in applause so that Laura and Jenna can see all the applause for continuing this work and offering this work. Laura and I have known each other for, as Laura said, many years as formal colleagues, collaborators, co-conspirers. So happy to be here. Again, my name is Leora. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm based in Los Angeles, California. Are there any other Californians aside from me and Laura and Livia? Yeah, Californians. We've been through quite a bit the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And are still going through it. So I'm taking a breath there. I'm really grateful to be with you again. And my colleague Livia, you can just wave, you don't need to say anything. Livia is our new school mental health program manager, and it is Livia's third day, people. Third day. So, for a trauma-informed supervisor, I keep saying on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, yeah, everything's cool. 10 being, what have I done and gotten myself into? Where are we today? So hopefully this helps Livia kind of stay more in the 1-2 zone. Anyway, I'm gonna bring up a couple slides, but I wanted to start by saying I carry many roles, and I also tend to be a fast talker when I get excited. So if at any single point for our processing and our learning, you need me to say an acronym in its full name or repeat a thing, please unmute and interrupt me. I was raised in a vibrant Jewish household where interruption was the sign of respect. So please do it. I take no offense. And I wanted to introduce 2 special things that we're holding in the soup of all the special things that we're holding. So we're going to talk about one new project that is open to all of you and those you serve coming your way September 17th, and it's called the School Crisis Recovery and Renewal Project. If we were in person, I would have stepped to the left every time I said a new word, because that's good adult learning, right? School Crisis Recovery and Renewal Project. And then I also want to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing as the National Mental Health Technology Transfer Network and the Grief Sensitivity Virtual Learning Institute that's next week. So it's only 12:06 my time, and I've said 87 million acronyms already. So before we do any of that, I wanted to just be really clear that part of today's kind of theme is really sitting with talking about grief sensitivity, grief leadership, and school mental health crisis leadership. And I'm saying that knowing that many of us feel those words and those titles personally and professionally, and the blend between the two, and we feel them in our heads and in our bodies and in our spirits. And it's September 3rd, and the amount of heaviness and the amount of lightness is present. And so I wanted to take a moment in the chat box. If you want to take a quiet moment with yourselves, and I'm going to take a breath now, to offer one person that you would like to dedicate this conversation to. And it could be a person from whom you've learned a lot about grief and loss from. It could be a person that is an ancestor for you. It could be a person whose life was lost and whose body has inspired us and called us into action. So take your time. I'm going to read them out loud, but anyone that you would like to dedicate this learning to today. So Adrian is, Susan is mentioning Irene, Lisa, my friend MJ, Janice or Janice, you'll let me know, Andrew, Scott, Joe, Patricia is dedicating to Madeline, Christine is dedicating to Shelley, Brian, Gloria, my Lola, Zelinda, Edna, Maria, my husband Neil, Adriana, my uncle Chris, who just passed away. Cheryl is dedicating this time to Grace, and Marianne is dedicating this time to Madalena, and I hope I'm pronouncing names correctly. Wendy is dedicating this time to students that we have lost. Wendy, I'm gonna also co-sign that, and I don't use the word lost, I use the word died, so I'm gonna dedicate this time to the students who I've loved who have died. And Claire is also mentioning a student that Claire's community lost this week. Yeah, I'm gonna take a couple more moments. And just as you're hearing me read and as the names are coming up, just notice what's coming up in yourself. Like if you're needing to go off video for a second, if you want to stay present on video, whatever you need to do. So I'm going to wait a couple more minutes to see if there are any other, and especially if you just came on, the invitation is to dedicate this time to someone who calls you into grief leadership, who calls you into grief action. Yeah. Yeah, and Laura's reminding us of the norm is to always take care of you. Yeah, yeah. Olivia is dedicating our time to Sal or Saul, dear brother. Yeah. So I'm holding it. I'm feeling my heart beating a little faster, and I'm feeling my throat really holding a lot. And I just want to name that as someone who's in conversations about grief in schools and death and dying in schools all the time, it is still painful. It is always painful. It doesn't get less painful. And so I'm so grateful for all of you to name all of these people and these lives who really purpose us. And I mean that intentionally, who purpose us, not who are our purpose. So I'm just going to invite us to take one moment of quiet moment. If you don't want to write, but if you just want to take a quiet moment to just think about who you want to dedicate this time to and who purposes us. And you can lower your eyes, you can turn off video, you can look out window. I'm looking at lilies that are right next to me. I'm going to show you all the lilies. So I'm going to look at my lilies, and then when you hear my voice come back, we'll start again, but I'm just going to take 1 minute of quiet. So as I mentioned at the top, again, my name is Leora, if we haven't met yet. And we're going to be talking about grief leadership, school mental health crisis leadership, and recovery and renewal. And I want to invite you to be on video if you would like, or to be off video if that feels more comfortable for you. And to please, 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 just let us know if you need us to slow down or move forward. And I really mean this. We are humans doing human work. So at any time, I can talk about all the projects and all the events and all the things, but I know that all of the ancestors that you put in the chat box are with us and are present with us. And so they both steward and they also strengthen, and they also might call some of our attention away from what I'm saying, and that's totally okay. So with that, I'm going to invite one more thing for settling, and then we'll move forward. I'm going to invite everyone, if you are open to it, to move your eyesight to the left, to look over your left shoulder, and then to move your eyesight over to your right shoulder. Just let your brainstem know, and come back to center if you'd like, just to let our brainstem know that we are appraising our own environment and that we are here. So with that, I'm gonna do a little screen share. And I want to promise you that you will get all the things from Jenna and from Laura at the end of this. So again, I know that many of us are different types of learners, and some of you are, it's much easier to like flip through something afterwards. So here we are. So I'm going to introduce, like I said at the top, I'm going to introduce us to two different projects, and both are kind of they co-live because they co-live with my work. So I'm really incredibly excited to introduce everyone to a new project that's coming up, launching September 17th, called the School Crisis Recovery and Renewal Project. And I'm also introducing, if you haven't met the MHGTC network yet, you'll see that on the bottom, the Pacific Southwest MHGTC. And if you're not in the Pacific Southwest, which is our region, the Pacific Islands, Hawaii, California, Nevada, and Arizona, you have your own region. And I really, really recommend you getting to know them. So this is what I wanted to just offer, that we're going to move through a couple of me saying some things, and then we'll be able to move into some discussion things. And I'm going to make sure that I have the chat box open so I can see if there are any questions. Yes, Laura is mentioning a key word in the chat box, which is free, although SAMHSA would like us to use the word no cost. Okay, this is being recorded, so no cost. Here we are. So yes, both projects are funded by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration, and they both will support us in our work supporting school mental health, grief, crisis recovery, and renewal leadership. All right, I'm not reading through this, but we are funded by SAMHSA, so every single thing with SAMHSA, as you all know, has to have a disclaimer. Do we all feel disclaimed? Anyone, can you give me a thumbs up? Okay, thank you. Jan gave me a thumbs up. We are good, we're disclaimed. So that's not even a verb, but it should be. So I want to introduce you to this new project. It is launching, as I said, September 17th. It is national. We are founded and funded to provide programming that supports school teams, communities, districts, counties, states who have experienced a big thing, also known as crisis, have gotten support for crisis readiness, have gotten response, and are really interested in doing what I think is sometimes really hard and complicated work, recovery, so that's the short term after a big thing happens, and then renewal, which is the long-term thing that happens after a big thing. And I'm using the word big thing because, as we know, trauma and crisis are subjective. And so I can use the word crisis or I can use the word trauma, but it's up to the community and the person to decide if those words land for them. So we are launched. I want to start, because I started with the dedication of this time, I want to start by saying this project, we wrote this project, and it is based on, Laura knows this, my research and my doctoral work that studied the impact of student death on educators. And I myself have lost many students who taught me. And I've been waiting for a really long time to get funding to promote this idea that school crisis doesn't stop the week after a big thing happens. The work, it happens, right? I'm seeing head nods and eyebrows go up. Like, we know that. We know that, by the way, for those of us who birth humans, that the healing doesn't stop the moment you give birth. It actually continues for much longer after that. And so, especially for those of us who are being trauma informed, we want to create systems and cultures that model the way the body understands trauma, and the body understands crisis, and the body understands healing. So this project is focused on actually expanding the last two R's of this crisis continuum that the National Child Traumatic Stress Network has talked about for a long time: school crisis readiness, response, and recovery. And our project adds a fourth R, and it's renewal. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means. And then we'll get into today. We already did our invitation, but I'm just sharing that this is the question, and feel free to use this question in other spaces that you facilitate. Okay, so yeah, so our goal, we launch on the 17th, and our goal is to support you who are navigating crisis recovery and renewal and may want to be connected to other folks across the country who have had shared big experiences like you. So perhaps you're a school who's had a lot of student death, and I'm seeing that in the chat box, and you would like to connect with other school communities to think about how you recover and renew from that experience. And I want to be really, really deliberate here, colleagues. We are not using the word renew in the sense that there's a silver lining to every death. No, 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 no. We're not using it in that way. We're actually talking about meaning making, and I know you talked to Michelle and Judy from the Meaning Makers Collective. We're talking about ways that we have broadened our worldview because of a big thing happening to us, and how we purpose ourselves moving forward. So we're here to provide no-cost technical assistance. So that might mean webinars, that might mean training, it might mean curricula, it might mean resources. Quite frankly, Livia and our team were figuring it all out in the time of COVID, because we actually wrote this project to be in community and to launch in person, but haha, isn't that very funny? So a lot of our work will be virtual, and so that means that all of you can attend and can participate and can co-lead. And this project is a collaboration of an organization I think a lot of you are familiar with, Trauma Transformed. Trauma Transformed does amazing work, and so they're our partner, and we're working together to create this initiative, this project, this work for all of us, for you, by you, with us. And we are partnering with David Schoenfeld at the National Center for School Crisis and Bereavement, and many of you know Dr. Schoenfeld as well. Okay, so I'm going to go through a couple more things here, and then we're going to get to talk, which is really the most important part of this whole thing. So you can see our audiences, we're really open at this point. I really will say that we originally wrote this project with the intention to support school communities that had already experienced a big thing, wildfires, school shooting, student death. And then COVID happened, and we know that some of you really identify COVID as a trauma experience or a crisis experience for your school communities. And so that might be the entry point that you come to us with. Okay, I'm not really gonna go through this as much, but I just wanted to offer, there's gonna be a lot that's gonna come your way. September 17th, we've got a lot of coaches, discussion hours, webinars, research. We wanna be your one-stop shop for anything related to recovery and renewal and schools and crisis and trauma. As it relates to crisis, just to be clear, there's a lot of support, as we know, around schools and trauma. Okay. So I want to talk quickly about our frame, and then we're going to get into some discussion. So Jenna, I'm going to cue you, and we're going to talk a little bit out loud about groups. And I'm just being transparent right now with what I'm saying to Jenna. Great. Okay, here we are. So I want to talk a little bit about what recovery and renewal looks like. So we say, our project says school crisis readiness is essential and response is critical, but what happens after matters too. Now I'm having a hard time with my own tagline. You got it. Okay. The other piece that I want to be really transparent about is that we do not assume that this work is linear. How nice and pretty would it be if a thing happened, we responded, we recovered, we renewed, all buttoned up, bowed, beautiful, shiny? Not true. Because we know that our communities that we serve go through chronic violence, systemic racism, systemic violence, systematic violence, which is different than systemic. So we know that many of you, and I'm really looking at you, are constantly in readiness, recovery, response, and renewal at the same time. So the slide that I'm about to go to is a nice, pretty visual because thank you, you know, PowerPoint, but it's not the lived experience of our leadership. So I'm gonna ask if there is someone in the chat box who will let me know if you'd be willing to read this out loud and unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. Would someone be willing to read this out loud? In the chat box, you can let me know. Brian, thank you, Brian. Okay, Jenna, can we unmute Brian? And Brian, I'm gonna invite you to read slowly, slightly theatrically, but not like so much theatrically, but like a little bit theatrically. And this is our definition of school mental health crisis leadership. All right, Brian, go for it.
School mental health crisis leadership. The individual, collective, organizational, and systemic skills, knowledge, and competencies based on awareness and acceptance of the responsibility and accountability to create school conditions, climates, and cultures that empower others to navigate uncertainty and harm so that all students, staff, and partners can repair, regulate, and restore.
Gorgeous. That was like the best balance of all the theater of all the things. Adriana nodded and Adriana agreed. In the chat box, if you can, I'm going to invite you to just take a moment to scan over all the words and write in the chat box, what are some key words or phrases that strike you, that resonate? So Laura is already modeling: repair, regulate, and restore, empower, responsibility. Let's see, what other terms? Oh, sorry. Repair, regulate, restore, climate, empower, accountability, awareness, and acceptance. Acceptance of responsibility. Big excel with that one. Yeah. Navigate. Okay, so lots of interest in the verb navigate. Accountability. Great. Thank you. Acceptance. Yeah. So our project, the School Crisis Recovery and Renewal Project, our purpose is going to create communities of practice and networks of practice that will help us as school crisis recovery and renewal leaders to do this work. Because we know that those verbs like acceptance and navigate are really hard to do alone and are really hard to do in isolation. And so we want to create national discourse and national climate and our own national conversation around this work. So one more thing and then the breakouts. So here we are. This is, thank you, Adriana. This is the way in which not only us, but also the NCTSN, the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, thinks about crisis, school mental health crisis, readiness, response, recovery, and renewal. And so I'm not gonna go very much into this. This is super high level. You can see my arms. They're so high that you can't even see my hands. And it's really important so that we're all clear about what the RR in our work can offer you and what you might come to us for. So if we start at the 1 a.m., 1 p.m., whatever time that's going to be in the readiness, we frame readiness as before a big thing happens. And we know this, right? Readiness work is workforce development, is competencies, setting up the culture of collaboration, and setting up communication profiles and protocols. And so school mental health crisis leadership focuses on what happened, what is happening, and what might happen. Past, present, future. Then a big thing happens or big things are happening and we go to response. And that is during the big thing, the acute, the fresh, it is in the now. And the work of response is on protection and reduction of harm, is on mitigation of panic. And we know that many of us on this call did that in March and April, and potentially even now. And a lot of the response work is responding to death and grief. is responding and accommodating. Yes, thank you, Starlene. Yes, thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna take a breath there because that's the readiness and response work. And then comes the recovery and the renewal. So the recovery is the week or month or year after a big thing happens. And recovery focuses on the past, what happened, and on the present, what is happening. Recovery is focused on two things, on connectedness and commonality. So you'll hear the trauma-informed principles of mutuality and peer support really, really sharp here, right? And we are adapting it from Judith Herman's work. Thank you, Judith Herman. Thank you, thank you. Talk about ancestor who led us through this work on safety, remembrance, mourning, and reconnection. So that's the recovery piece. Then the piece that comes next that we hope to really develop, and we want you to join us to help us write, like create and ideate, is the renewal. So that's a year after or many years after, 5, 6 years after a big thing. I know that there are those of you on the line who are supporting your students after they have graduated and who are still grappling with grief whenever they're navigating their post-secondary or their next chapter, right? Alumni feel just because they moved from the school community doesn't mean they're now not in a school community when someone dies or something big happens. So the renewal piece focuses on the present and also the future. And the renewal piece, and Laura, I hope that this is where like your tribe can just come in strong here, because the renewal piece is about constructing a coherent narrative. We know that trauma's function is to break up the body and the brain and the spirit story. And the healing work happens when we put together a story. Why us, with us, and by us. And it is about meaning making and creating and reimagining. And then it goes back into the readiness. So our project focuses on those two R's. So I'm gonna just pause here and I'm gonna invite you to ask clarifying questions. Let me just see if I'm right. Yep, I am right. I'm gonna see if there are clarifying questions about our project or about renewal and recovery. And I am gonna invite us to get into, ready, Jenna? We are gonna move into breakout groups after we do some clarifying questions. Let's see, 40, 10. If we can have no more than 5 folks in a breakout to specifically talk about either the school crisis leadership definition that I mentioned, or recovery or renewal work. What does it look like for you? What could it look like, right? So I'm gonna just pause. I'm gonna say that again after when we're about to move into breakouts, but I wanna just see if there are any clarifying questions about anything that I have said or done thus far. Anything that I've said or done thus far. Okay. Wait, did I count to 10? That's the teacher. Yes. Okay, great. Thank you, Jen. Yes, I'm going to repeat the goal. But I wanted to see if there were any clarifying questions for anything else thus far. Did I count to 10? Because that's the teacher hold silence thing. Okay. This is, I think, Livia, I'd like you to put this in our calendar as like the only time that apparently there are no clarifying questions of things that I have said, because that is a historic moment. Okay, great. We are going to break out into small groups. I'm going to invite you to introduce yourself again. And we are going to, you have 3 options. One is to talk about that definition that we just read, school mental health crisis leadership, or to talk about what recovery feels like for you as a school leader, or what renewal looks like as a school leader, or go rogue and anything that comes up for you after you have heard what I've presented thus far. I like the go rogue option. So definition, recovery, renewal, or go rogue. And I am going to just quickly see how much time. Jenna, where are we in our time?
We have about half an hour left.
Lovely. Oh, beautiful. Okay. We're going to break out for 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Okay. If you want to stay in this room, I am happy to be your stay in the room person if you do not want to break out. But I really, really encourage you to break out because it makes Jenna's breakout much easier. So I'm going to do it one more time. the definition, recovery, renewal, or go rogue, and we'll come back in 15 minutes. Please introduce yourself before you do anything else when you go into your breakout. Okay, we'll see you soon. One sentence as I was like, that's a great question. Here's, and then boop, I got popped to another room. So I'm gonna try and remember who I was talking to and make sure that there's not murderous frustration, you know, with me. Okay, so let's do this in the chat box as we're all coming back together, in the chat box. If you can put one takeaway, one thing that you want to remember from your discussion, one takeaway. So in the chat box, if you can put welcome back, if you can put one takeaway that you remember from your discussion. And I'm just scanning. It looks like we may have lost a couple folks, but that is okay. We are still here. So one takeaway. And okay, great. I'm gonna scroll down. Okay, so Chela named the importance of communication between the systems. Yes, I mean, yes, massive, yes. What can post-vention efforts look like? Starlene, that is our project's essential question. Great. Adriana, how do we manage the intense anger when we are in response? I mean, Livia, these questions are like, right. Brian, it's hard to prepare for an event with the day-to-day demands because the topic is tricky and we avoid them and then stay in reactivity. Yeah. So I want to just stay in resonance. I do a lot of pre-service education to teachers, to social workers, to school counselors. And we get a lot of folks who say, I don't want to talk about my students dying. That's not why I came into this work. And I say, that is not why you came into this work. And that is the reality of this work. So we need to have conversations to grow and expand our grief muscles so that when the things happen, they aren't trauma. They aren't overwhelming, but they are something that we can navigate. So Susan is saying leadership needs to remember that everyone is affected as people. And again, Adriana, we know that what we need to do when we are angry and in response, but it's extremely hard to move towards recovery. Thank you so much. And Catherine, I think I got caught off when Catherine was asking me a question about our project. So I'm going to answer that question as we move into closing. And I just want to say, I only got into 3 groups, but I want to say thank you so much for supporting one another in a really sticky conversation in a short amount of time. I'm really in awe of all of you. So I'm going to share my screen one more time, and then we're going to move into closing. This is not where we're going to be. Don't worry, we're not reading that whole thing again. Okay, we're going to go into the, so now what, right? So what happens now? So one offering when we talk about expanding our grief muscles is that next week, and it's in ACES Connection calendar. Laura, I finally figured out how to put events up without any technical assistance. Bravo, bigger than my doctorate. Okay, in next week, we are hosting a absolutely free Grief Sensitivity Virtual Learning Institute. And you can come for one session, you can come for all the sessions, you can come for one day, you can come for the second day. We're gonna host the exact same thing in November, right before the holidays, with the exact same lineup, with a 2.0. So you can come this in September and then come back in November to enrich your learning. This is a lot of words, but all I want you to know is that registration closes on 5 p.m. Pacific time on Tuesday. It is open to everyone. And Laura will send out the link. And I just want to talk a little bit about, there's going to be a keynote from Dr. Kathy Shear, who is the founder of the Center for Complicated Grief. And then we have tracks. So we have school mental health speakers, we have evidence-based and culturally defined practice speakers, we have grief sensitivity speakers. So if you're not in schools, if you're not a clinician, if you just want to learn about what it means to be grief sensitive in the workplace, we have that for you. And then on Friday, the 11th, we are closing listening to young people who are going to help us navigate and listen into what they need from each other and from us. Thank you, Lara, for posting in the chat box. So that link that Lara just posted gets you the registration links, the full brochure, and then when you register, you'll then get all the Zoom links so you can join us. So I really, really hope you join us. It's such, like, let me tell you, it is such a rich lineup. And it's completely free. So everything will be recorded and will be put up on the website as well. So I wanted to, a couple other resources to help you. And again, this will go out to you in your email. In June, we released the School Mental Health Crisis Leadership Lessons. It is an incredible guide. I'm not saying it because I co-authored it. I'm saying it because it houses voices of experience from school mental health leaders, state, community, young people, families on readiness, recovery, readiness, response, recovery, and renewal. And so we really hope a lot of the work that I talked about today comes from this guide. So it is there for you. And then lastly, if you want to get in touch with us, if you're in our region, the Pacific Southwest, please let us know that it's another one of our projects and it's open to anyone in the mental health or school mental health workforce. This is when I'm going really fast, but I'm going to stay on if you have any questions. And then 2 other websites, and this is for everyone, no matter if you're in our region or not. There's 2 other websites that I really hope you know you can access. And myself and colleagues, we populate these weekly. So it's a national landing for COVID, grief, loss, and bereavement, and a national landing for school mental health resources from across the country. So this is all for you. And then very last but not least, this is where, Catherine, your question comes in. If you are interested in joining our project, the School Crisis Recovery and Renewal Project, so not just general school mental health, but focusing on these pieces that we've been talking about, please click the link. I'm gonna ask Livia to drop the bit.ly into the chat link. Please let us know who you are and how we can connect with you. Thank you, Livia. And Catherine, to your question, Catherine said, well, I'm in Illinois and y'all are in California. How's this working? So we have a full team of coaches who will be providing intensive consultation and coaching and creating communities of practice and networks of practice across the country. And then in year 2 and 3, so not this year, but following, we're going to be funding educators and young people to come together to write training curricula on school recovery and renewal so that we can learn from folks who live through it. Okay, I think that is it. I'm gonna stay, should I stay on the slide, Lara, before I close? Stay here, maybe? I don't know. Is it helpful? I don't know. Lara's muted. Lara.
Give me 1 second. I'm just trying to put all the links in there. Awesome. Yes. Okay. So make sure. I know everyone will be like, I want the links. So I'm just making sure I could get them all in there. And it looks like we do them all.
Yeah. And I just, sorry, Laura, I set you up to come on, but I just want to say one more thing, because we started with talking about people who guide and purpose us. I mean this. I find my own healing through intellectualizing my grief. So this project is a way for me to regulate and restore and find meaning. This project is the way that I renew. And I think that that is how many of you might also feel, that if you feel like taking an active role in owning an experience that might feel like it happened to you rather than with you, then I really invite you to participate, and not just participate, but join us so that we can all navigate this super wobbly, sticky, hard, painful, all over the place thing together. And we're here. So let us know. We're here to make it what you need it to be. So I'm gonna now really mute myself.
And you can stop sharing your screen. Awesome, thank you. And I just, this resonates so much for me. I know we've talked about this before, sometimes when things seem hard or we don't feel capable. Like I'm one of those people, I don't feel competent at facilitating conversations around grief with staff. Like that's something I would run as fast as I could in the other direction if that was my responsibility, right? And so I'm joining the institute because it's something, it's a muscle I want to strengthen, but I also, remind us all, like, if that's not your safe, comfortable space, then encourage colleagues to be the ones that lead it and join this learning, make sure that there's someone at your campus, your district, your school who has strength in this area. And so I'm really excited to dive in. So
cosign, bold, italicize, that's so important. I want to be really clear that because of all of our own lived experience and our own privileges, that some of us have more space to be in the grief work than others. And that is in itself how we can be anti-racist and trauma informed, is being really clear about how grief, that there's disparity in the grief experience. Right?
Yep.
So
absolutely.
I just really wanted to name that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's really important, these, especially right now, these conversations are crucial and must be had. So with a few minutes left, if there's anything else that, you guys know, you can raise your hand. Jen, I can unmute you if you have any questions or comments for Leora. I'm sure she's happy to answer them. I love what you said about intellectualizing grief, because sometimes I think for me that's a buffer. Like I can try and get cognitive about it and not have to feel it. Like, ew, feelings. But I love that way to think about it though too. That's awesome. Really helpful. Well, I encourage you all to take advantage of the resources they have. I'm always amazed at the plethora of no cost materials. So please explore, yes, please explore the Technical Assistance Center that SAMHSA has provided for you.
There is one question from Susan.
Okay, go for it, Susan. Oh, what first three things you think have to be discussed when training on grief management?
Susan with the kapow. One is that I think, and I can stay on a little bit afterwards for Susan. Where did Susan go? Oh, there you are with the flowers. Okay. Are those lilacs? Oh, no. Okay. I don't know, but they look like lilacs. So one is that I really encourage you to come next week, because there are folks who've been teaching grief counseling and grief in the workplace in a more specific way. But two, when I think about training, your language itself is interesting around grief management. I think the first piece is just in the same way that we talk about anti-racism work, that the work is in multiple spheres: the individual, the interpersonal, the team and collective, and then the broader work culture. So or the organizational, right? So what does grief look like in my body, in my lived experience? What does grief look like when in community and when in peer? And what does grief look like at the organizational level? And the piece, just like with trauma, we say, like, please don't just talk about trauma, please also talk about resilience, even though that word, I have feelings about that word. The same with grief. Let's not only talk about grief, but also talk about healing. Also talk about healing.
Oops. Sorry, I'm gonna mute.
That's okay. You got stuff. You got, yeah, hi. So that's what comes up for me. But other folks might have more answers for you. And I know, Brian, what does the dream future look like in this applied context at a school or district? Yes, thank you for that question. So I'll tell you my hope and dream is that in 5 years after the funding of this project sunsets, that we are more comfortable talking about death and dying on our school campuses. We're more clear about how grief and trauma are connected and also not connected, how they're same and different. We are, when we're talking about workforce development, we're also creating grief sensitivity and attunement into that workforce development, and that what folks needed, wanted, got, or didn't get when a big thing happened in the past informs and recorrects how we provide supports in the future. So that's me, Brian, but I'm hopeful that you add more. Yeah.
That's great.
I take a breath with that one. 5 years feels like a long time, but also is not a long time.
Yeah, you've been working towards this a long time.
Yeah.
So happy for you. I'm so excited about this, and I can't wait to see how it comes to fruition and be part of it, even as an observer and sometimes participant. Yeah, I'm super excited.
Thanks, Laura. I know a lot of folks have Brian's, all the Zoom. So you have our contact information. Join us on the 17th, and let's keep sitting with the truth that death and loss reveals.
And we have a no Zoom, no beyond, no imagining, no better normals, all of these things that we call them. Next week, we're taking a week off so that our folks can have a rest, and then we'll be back the week after that.
Great.
Well, have a good 2 weeks, folks, and I'll see you when we return. And yes, the recording's always available on we have our own YouTube channel. It's super exciting. Yeah, so if you go to the ACEs in Education homepage, you'll see it connect to the YouTube channel, and you can watch any of these from the past since April.
Cool. Thanks, Laura. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Adriana and Stephanie and Ramona and all the people who are bouncing off now. Bethany and Crystal and Mackenzie and Zelinda and Jenna, thank you for all your help. Did I miss anyone? I think we got it. Ramona, we'll figure out your audio in the future. We want to hear from you.
She's got lots of good things to say.
I'm very sure. Ramona and I both have gap front teeth, and it is a sign of wisdom in many cultures. So Ramona, I see you.
All right.
All right. We'll talk later. Thank you, everyone.